It started with silence. Not the kind born from elegance, but the kind that lingers after insult. Lawrence Monroe stepped into the luxury watch store he built from scratch and recognized. Unseen. And immediately unwelcome. He wore no suit today. No gold cufflinks. No visible signs of status. Just a black hoodie. Faded jeans. And the quiet confidence of a man who'd survived boardrooms and bankruptcy. The kind of man who had nothing left to prove except to himself. The boutique was immaculate gold inlays on dark walnut shelves. Vintage Omegas resting under tempered glass. And a scent of bergamot mixed with old money. But none of that mattered. The moment the store manager spotted him, she didn't greet him. She didn't smile. She simply stepped in front of him like a barrier and gestured subtly toward the door. "Sir, we're not open to the public without appointments," she said, rehearsed and cold. Lawrence looked around. A white couple sipping champagne on leather stools. A young man trying on a rose gold Audemars Piguet. No one had been asked for an appointment. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a card, laid it gently on the counter. Lawrence J. Monroe. It read, Chief Executive Officer, Horology House. And but she didn't look. She didn't even care. And that was her last mistake. Because in 7 minutes, everything in this store would be turned upside down. He should have left. Lawrence stood still for a moment longer, watching as the manager turned her back on him to greet a new customer, someone in a tailored blazer and designer shoes. The man received a beaming smile, a glass of Veuve Clicquot, and instant access to the display cases. Lawrence exhaled, slow and heavy. Then, instead of walking out, he stepped aside and settled into the shadows near the private consultation alcove. A semi-translucent divider offered just enough cover. It also offered something else. A front row seat to the rot inside his own company. That's when he heard it. The voice was unmistakable, Tanya. His store manager. Cold. Dismissive. Speaking to someone in the employee hallway just around the divider. Look, I don't care if he says he had an appointment. Did you see what he was wearing? She snapped. People like that don't buy watches here. They steal them. End of free. Silence. Then a timid voice. Male. Maybe an associate. But what if he really was a client? Tonya scoffed. Then he can go shop somewhere else? I don't serve beggars playing dress up. This isn't a pawn shop, it's Horology House. The words hit Lawrence like a slap to the face. He looked down at his hands. The same hands that had signed every paycheck in this building. The same hands that shook investors' palms in conference rooms to keep the lights on during the pandemic. The same hands that had pulled this brand from a garage in Inglewood to a flagship on Rodeo Drive. Now they were being reduced to a stereotype. He leaned back, forcing himself to stay quiet. The conversation continued, dragging knives across his dignity with each word. I told the board we needed a better clientele. Tonya went on. Lower now. Voice bitter. But they sent him instead. What kind of CEO doesn't even show his face? Just sits up in some tower and collects checks. This place is dying. And I'm stuck babysitting nobodies. End of 4. That was it. Lawrence had heard enough. He rose from the alcove, his steps slow but deliberate. As he passed through the lounge again, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. A young sales associate, maybe 19, standing behind the espresso bar. Frozen. Eyes wide. She'd heard it too. Their eyes met for half a second. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She knew. And now, so did it. This wasn't just about one insult. This was about a culture rotting from the inside. A hierarchy of prejudice dressed in silken diamonds, and he, Lawrence Monroe, had been blind to it all. Until now. The worst part wasn't the words Tanya used. It was how easily they came. As if this wasn't the first time. As if she'd said worse. As if no one had ever challenged her before. But that was about to change. Because Lawrence wasn't just going to confront Tanya. He was going to find out how deep this poison ran. Who else had been swallowing it in silence? Lawrence didn't sleep that night. He sat alone in the penthouse apartment, the company leased for out-of-town executives except. He rarely used it. Tonight, it felt like a cell, a cold, modern prison wrapped in glass and skyline views. On the coffee table before him, his phone buzzed. Again, emails, calendar invites, investment proposals, all demanding attention. But not one of them felt important now. What mattered was the sickness in his gutand, the voice of his store manager still echoing like venom. People like that don't buy watches here. And the words weren't just offensive. They were systemic, casual, practiced, which meant this wasn't just about Tanya. It was about what he'd built, or maybe what he'd failed to protect. By morning, he was already on the move. Hoodie off. Saudon. This time, not undercover but still unnoticed. He arrived early before the store opened and headed straight to HR. He didn't call ahead. Didn't bring his assistant. He needed unfiltered truth. Not polished updates. Pull the internal staff reports for the Beverly Hills boutique. He told the HR director. Every incident report, every complaint, last 2 years, and, an hour later, the pages stacked in front of him told a quiet but damning story. 3 customer service complaints mentioning discrimination or profiling, 2 associate resignations citing hostile management, 1 dismissed incident report involving Tanya accusing a Latino customer of lingering too long by the Rolex wall. The complaint never reached upper management. It had been resolved internally. End of 4. He dug deeper. Watched footage. Reviewed schedules. Names surfaced. 1 stuck. Derek Jameson. Sales associate. Hired a year ago. Worked weekends and swing shifts. Tanya's shifts. Never received commission bonuses. Despite high customer satisfaction ratings, multiple 5-star reviews on Yelp mentioned the younger black gentleman who really helped me feel welcome. And yet no promotions, no raises, no employee of the month, just silence. Lawrence called the store's back office, asked if Derek was scheduled that day. He was. 30 minutes later, Lawrence stood in the staff hallway, just out of sight. As Derek clocked in, he moved with careful precision, head down, uniform pressed, steps quiet. A young man used to navigating spaces that weren't made for him. Lawrence followed discreetly, slipping into the break room moments after Derek poured his morning coffee. "Mr. Jameson," Lawrence said softly. Derek turned, startled. "Sir, I'd like to talk with you. Off the record." End of. There was a long pause. Derek's eyes darted toward the hallway, toward the store, then back to Lawrence. "I don't want any trouble," he said quietly. "You're not in trouble," Lawrence replied, "but I think you've been through enough of it." And they sat. And for the first time in months, maybe longer, Derek spoke freely about the customers he was quietly redirected from, the promotions that went to people with less experience, the racist comments he overheard but didn't report because he knew no one would listen. Until now. Lawrence didn't take notes. He didn't need to. The pain in Derek's voice said everything. And suddenly, the real reason Lawrence had walked into that store undercover wasn't about being disrespected. It was about finally seeing what had been there all along. The next morning, the store opened like it always did in time. Polished. Perfect. But beneath the surface, a storm waited. Lawrence sat in the office above the boutique, watching the security feed. His own face stared back at him from the screen, tired, firm, waiting. He had already reviewed the plan with corporate HR. Legal was on standby. Cameras were rolling. Audio recording. Not for revenge. For truth. At exactly 9:27 a.m., Tanya walked through the employee entrance with her usual swagger. Hair flawless. Heels clicking like punctuation marks. She didn't notice the shift in air. Not yet. She tapped into the system, checked appointments, then made her way to the showroom floor. That's when the call came. Tonya. Mr. Monroe would like to see you upstairs. SMO. She blinked. Who? Mr. Lawrence Monroe. SMO. Her face stiffened. Not confusion. Recognition. She made her way up slowly. Couches now. The moment the door closed behind her, Lawrence stood. No preamble. No small talk. You remember me? He asked. Tanya froze. Du didn't realize. You did. He interrupted. You looked at me. Judged me. Talked about me. I heard every word. M4. Her mouth opened. Then closed. Panic flickered across her features. I was there. In the lounge. I heard what you said to that associate. About me. About the customers who don't belong here. M. Grissett. She straightened her shoulders. Tried to salvage control. Look. Things get misinterpreted. They don't. He said. Not when it's that clear. Not when it's that cruel. M. There was a pause. A moment of stillness that seemed to suspend time. Do you know who Derek Jameson is? He asked quietly. Tanya's silence said enough. He's one of our best reviewed employees. Polite. Professional. Customers love him. Yet, in a year, he's made less commission than anyone on your team. And I've got 10 Yelp reviews praising him by name while you wrote him up twice for being too informal. And, she looked down. He kept going. You've fostered a culture where bias isn't just tolerated, it's practiced. Protected. You didn't just fail as a manager. You failed as a human being. Then his voice softened. Just a bit. I built this brand for people like me. For people who were told luxury wasn't theirs. For dreamers who came from nowhere. And somewhere along the way, I left this place in the wrong hands. Tonya looked up. Her voice brittle now. So what? You're going to fire me? Lawrence didn't answer immediately. He let the silence stretch. Heavy with everything unsaid. No. He said finally. I'm going to ask you something harder than that. And, her eyes narrowed. I want you to look me in the eye and tell me why someone like Derek had to work twice as hard for half the respect. Tell me why you looked at me and saw a threat instead of a leader. And, her lips trembled. She opened her mouth but no words came. Because the answer wasn't something she could fake. Not anymore. And for the first time in her career, Tanya was facing something she couldn't finesse. Consequences, real ones, and behind her silence came the beginning of something else. Regret. The office emptied slowly. HR left first. Legal soon after. A formal report would be filed, a review conducted, policies rewritten. But paperwork couldn't fix what Lawrence felt lodged in his chest. He stayed behind. Alone again. The city buzzed beyond the tall windows. But inside, there was only stillness. That and the weight of truth pressing down on him harder than anger ever could. Because somewhere beneath the outrage, beneath the humiliation, he'd felt walking into his own store and being treated like a trespasser. Something else had begun to rise. Guilt. Not because he'd been disrespected, but because he'd let this happen on his watch. He'd spent the last 5 years building an empire of elegance, exclusivity, and upward mobility. But in chasing luxury, he had abandoned something more valuable: people. He'd scaled too fast, handed power to people he barely knew. He built the storefront, stocked the cases, launched the marketing campaign, but he never really saw the hearts behind the counter. The bruised pride, the missed opportunities, the quiet discrimination brushed off as miscommunication. He remembered the launch party 3 years ago. The speeches, the champagne. He'd raised a glass and said, "Horology House will be a symbol of excellence, a home for those who've never seen themselves in luxury." But excellence without equity, that wasn't progress. It was just performance. He thought of Derek again, a young man trying to prove he belonged, not just to customers, but to his own team. Working harder, smiling longer, carrying a silence that no one ever asked about. And Lawrence had never once met him, never learned his name until yesterday. That cut the deepest, because Derek believed in the dream Lawrence had abandoned. And Lawrence, he'd been too high up to hear when that dream started cracking. He picked up his phone. No camera crew, no PR stunt. Just him and the front-facing lens. He hit record. "Near, some of you know me as the founder of Horology House. But today, I'm speaking as a man who failed to protect the very people this company was built for." His voice caught. But he didn't stop. "I was mistaken to think success meant stepping back. I see now that leadership isn't about distance. It's about presence, accountability. And today, I start making that right." End of rest. He ended the video. Didn't edit it. Just uploaded it to the company's social channels. Not for likes. Not for applause. For responsibility. Because when a leader finally sees the damage done under their watch, silence is no longer an option. He stood up, glanced once more at the glass desk. The city beyond. The empire he'd built, and, for the first time in a long time, he saw it clearly. Not as a monument, but as a mirror. If stories like this move you, consider subscribing. There are more real moments ahead that reveal what truly matters. The next day, Derek arrived early. Too early. He wasn't scheduled. But he showed up anyway, uncertain whether to expect a handshake or a security escort. Word had spread. The manager was gone. Something had changed. And the air inside the boutique felt different, like the moment after a storm, where things looked the same. But nothing truly was. Lawrence waited in the private lounge. Not as a CEO today, but as a man holding out his hand. There was no suit, no script, just humility. When Derek walked in, Lawrence stood. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. Derek nodded. Cautious, guarded. He hadn't slept much. The call from corporate yesterday hadn't said much, either, just that the CEO wanted to speak with him privately. "I owe you an apology," Lawrence began, "not just for what happened, but for what I allowed to happen by not being here sooner." Derek's jaw tensed. He didn't speak. "Not yet," Lawrence continued. "What you've endured here, being overlooked, underpaid, disrespected, it should never have happened. And I want to make it right." And he reached into his jacket, pulled out a letter and offer. Full promotion, back pay, a lead role in rewriting the company's internal DEI training, The kind of position people spent years chasing. He held it out. Derek didn't take it. Not right away. Instead, he looked Lawrence dead in the eyes. "You think a promotion's going to fix it?" His voice was low. "Steady. I worked here for a year and no one knew my name. I had customers write in about me. Thank me. Ask for me by name and... Still, I was treated like I didn't belong." Lawrence nodded, absorbing it all. "I came in early. I stayed late. I covered shifts. I smiled through things I shouldn't have had to. And when I tried to speak up, I got warned to watch my tone. And a pause. A breath. Now suddenly I'm valuable. Suddenly I matter." Lawrence stepped back, letting the words hit. "You do matter," he said quietly. "You always did. And I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to prove that this place can change." End of Fent. Derek looked down at the envelope. His hand twitched, but he didn't take it. "I'm tired," he said. "Tired of fighting for a seat at tables where I was never wanted. Tired of being asked to fix what I didn't break." End of Fent. He turned to leave, stopped in the doorway. "You want to change the culture?" he said, without turning around. "Start by listening to the people you ignored." And from, and just like that, he was gone. Lawrence stood alone in the lounge, the letter still in his hand, the air still humming with the weight of hard truth. Redemption had been offered, but healing couldn't be bought. It had to be earned. And Lawrence understood now some wounds needed time before they could trust again. Lawrence didn't sleep for 3 nights. Not because of guilt, though, that lingered, but because of urgency. He knew now that change couldn't be handed down in memos. It had to be felt, seen, lived. So he went back to the foundation. Not the branding, not the profits, the people. The Monday after Derek walked out, Lawrence walked in this time. To every store in the Los Angeles region. No press, no filters, just his presence. He stood behind counters, watched interactions, spoke with junior staff without the barrier of title. And for the first time in a long time, he listened. What he heard was sobering. Team members who'd been silenced, talented staff buried under micromanagement, quiet moments of racism and classism dismissed as misunderstandings. And across every location, the same phrase echoed back to him more than once. "It's not the watches, it's the weight." Adrian, the weight of proving yourself in a space that didn't want you, the weight of trying to smile through disrespect because your rent depended on it, the weight of feeling invisible. That week, Lawrence made a promise to himself, and to every employee who'd ever felt unseen. The culture stops pretending. The silence ends now. He launched a complete company-wide audit, bringing in third-party ethics teams to review every layer of management. Employee testimonials were collected anonymously. Exit interviews were reevaluated. Past complaints once labeled resolved were reopened. But it didn't stop at investigation. It started with confession. Lawrence wrote a personal letter to all 187 employees of Horology House. Not from the board, from him. In it, he admitted what many CEOs never do, that he had failed to protect the soul of his own company. That elegance without empathy was just emptiness in disguise. He followed that letter with real action. Every manager was required to reapply for their position evaluated not by sales metrics, but by peer feedback. A new diversity, equity, and inclusion board was formed, led by employees from all store levels, not just corporate. Quarterly empathy workshops were made mandatory, not optional. Most radically, the company launched the Listening Laba Rolling Forum, where any employee could anonymously submit a story or experience No filters. No fear. In a move that shocked investors but inspired staff. Lawrence also froze all C-suite bonuses for the year and redirected the funds to build a scholarship fund for frontline workers seeking to pursue careers in design, marketing, or management. Critics online called it overcorrecting. But to Lawrence, it wasn't overcorrecting. It was overdue. He knew the trust of people like Derek wouldn't be won back with policy changes. It would take consistency, transparency, and the courage to walk into every room, especially the uncomfortable ones, and say, "I was wrong. Praise." Lawrence stood in front of the entire Beverly Hills team that Friday. His voice didn't shake. His eyes didn't flinch. "This store will still sell luxury," he said, "but it will no longer sell out its people to do it." Praise. And for the first time since the scandal broke, people clapped. Not because they were told to, because they believed something new had started. 2 weeks passed. Spring came early that year, and with it, a softness in the air that hadn't touched the store in a long time. Sunlight spilled through the boutique's tall windows in warm gold streaks. The same marble floors gleamed. The same luxury displays sparkled, but the atmosphere had changed. So had the people. Lawrence sat near the entrance, now no longer hidden behind tinted glass and executive walls. He rotated between locations, kept a stool near the front counter, and made it a point to greet employees by name. He didn't just drop in. He showed up. Still, something remained unfinished. A presence missing. Until the door opened at 10:07 a.m. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Derek stepped inside. He wore a clean navy jacket, dark slacks, and a look that blended hesitation with something harder to define: hope. Maybe, or at least the remains of it. The sales team noticed first. Some smiled. Some looked away. Unsure. Lawrence stood slowly, his body suddenly very still. Derek didn't move toward him, just scanned the room. The displays had changed. So had the Cygnus Mall plaques now stood beside each collection, highlighting not just the brand, but the stories of the artisans who crafted them. Photos of watchmakers from Senegal, Brazil, Korea, even an old photo of Lawrence, young and bright-eyed, assembling his first custom piece in a tiny workshop. "Welcome back," a voice said gently behind the counter. It wasn't Lawrence. It was a young woman, Mia, a recent hire. She stepped out from behind the register and offered Derek a menu from the new guest lounge, where staff now encouraged visitors to sit, relax, and learn about timepieces without pressure. A space created not for buyers, but for belonging. Derek gave a small nod. "I'm not here to shop." She smiled. "Doesn't matter. You're still welcome." And one. He looked past her, eyes locking with Lawrence across the boutique. No words. Just a long, quiet look. Two men, separated by position, joined by experience. Lawrence finally stepped forward. "I meant it," he said, voice low. "Everything I promised. It's happening." And one. Derek folded his arms. "I see that." And one. "I didn't expect you to come back." And one. "I didn't come to stay." Derek replied. That landed heavy, but not as a wound, more like a checkpoint. "I just wanted to see." Derek continued. "If it was real." One. Lawrence nodded. And Derek looked around, at the staff more diverse, now, at the subtle changes, at the warmth. "I think it might be," he said. A long breath passed between them. Derek didn't ask for his old job back. Lawrence didn't offer it. The moment wasn't about employment. It was about dignity. A few minutes later, Derek turned to leave. But just before he reached the door, he paused. He looked over his shoulder. "You keep this up," he said. "You might actually change something." And Lawrence didn't smile. He just answered, "Steady and certain. That's the plan." And for the first time, Derek nodded not with resentment, but with something else. Permission. Spring gave way to summer. And with each passing week, the changes at Horology House stopped being news and started becoming normal. Inside the flagship store, the mood had shifted from silent tension to quiet pride. Staff meetings, once filled with buzzwords and quotas, now began with personal check-ins. New hires were mentored, not micromanaged. And every name tag now bore not just a name, but a hometown, a small gesture, reminding everyone of where they came from and why that mattered. Lawrence didn't go back to his tower. He stayed ground level, sometimes sweeping the floor with the closers, sometimes sitting through onboarding sessions. Not as a guest, but as a student. He didn't need applause. He needed understanding. Derek returned. Eventually, not for the job, but for the mission. Lawrence had asked him to help design the company's new mentorship program, and Derek agreed. With one condition: it wouldn't be for optics. It would be for outcomes. They called it time worth keeping. A nod to the watches. Yes, but also to the moments that built trust, growth, respect. Like week, junior staff were paired with senior mentors, not just for sales advice, but for life support, the kind no handbook could offer. Derek led the first group himself. 4 associates. 3 of them, people who almost quit before anyone knew their names. Now, they were thriving. One of them, Marisol, was a single mother from East L, who'd never owned a luxury watch in her life. Now, she was on track to become assistant manager by fall. The store became a case study in corporate empathy, and customers noticed. Yelp reviews changed. Not just raving about the watches, but the experience. Guests wrote about feeling seen, feeling heard. Some shared their own stories of being judged in luxury spaces. Horology House, they said, felt different now. The media caught wind. Headlines rotated in and out of feeds. CEO fixes the culture he ignored. Luxury brand finds its soul. From discrimination to redemption, one boutique's wake-up call. But the real proof came in moments no camera captured. Like the morning when an elderly man walked in wearing a dusty baseball cap and asked about a vintage Tag Heuer. A year ago, he might have been turned away. Now, he was greeted with a smile, offered espresso, and shown 3 models, none of which he bought, but he came back the next week. Because respect, once given, tends to return. And behind the counter, Derek stood tall, not as a victim, not as a hero, but as a man who had helped steer a broken system toward healing. Lawrence watched it all unfold from the corner. He didn't take credit. He took notes. Because rebuilding wasn't about ego. It was about effort. And it was far from finished. But now it had begun. Together, the sky was soft with dusk, casting long golden rays through the boutique's glass walls. The store was closed now. Quiet. Still. Only 2 people remained inside. Lawrence stood alone near the back, placing a new timepiece into its velvet cradle. It was the first watch he'd ever designed restored, polished, and now displayed not as a product, but as a reminder, a symbol of beginnings, both fragile and brave. Behind him, Derek approached slowly. He wasn't dressed in uniform. No name tag. Just a denim jacket and tired eyes. I saw the plaque, Derek said softly. Lawrence turned. Which one? The one with your photo. You looked lighter back then. Nope. Lawrence chuckled gently. I didn't know how much weight I was about to carry. Nope. Derek nodded, then glanced at the old watch under the glass. You ever think about quitting? He asked. Lawrence paused, thought carefully. Every day I stopped showing up. He said, I just didn't know it. And a long silence stretched between them, heavy with understanding. Then Derek reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. I found this in the staff locker. Must have been left behind. And he unwrapped it. Lawrence blinked. It was the very same apology letter he had written weeks ago, the one Derek had refused to take. The envelope still sealed. You keep it, Derek said. Not because I didn't read it, but because now, you don't need to say it twice. And Lawrence took the envelope. His hand lingered on it. Then he placed it gently beside the old watch. 2 artifacts. 1 story. As Derek turned to leave, Lawrence spoke one final time. Thank you for coming back. And Derek didn't look back this time. He just said, steady and sure. Thank you for meaning it. And